Hey, Patrick.
Hey, Michael J.
It's all here. Ravnica version 3.0.
Yes, the guilds. And this time it's serious.
Yeah, it wasn't serious in the age of like Lightning Helix and so on.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's a continuing amount of seriousness. But
increasing level of seriousness.
Yes, and some of these cards are extremely serious. Some of them less serious, but possibly seriously good. But I'm kind of interested to see where Standard goes with this, because it seems like we are. Well, first of all, obviously we are very due for a change up. And every early indication is making it look like there is going to be a table flip on the horizon.
I cannot wait.
Yes. And in fact, kind of curious your thoughts on just starting off now that we actually have the full range of goblins. Is there enough? Like, for instance. Does Torch Courier constitute a good enough goblin 1-drop? That's the 1/1 for 1. Would sacrifice it to give another target creature haste until end of turn.
So back in the day, I want to say probably 1998, which is actual multiple decades ago at this point. I believe Mike Long went undefeated in at Worlds with a goblin deck, a red aggro deck that had a worse one casting cost 1/1 haste goblin than Torch Courier.
Raging Goblin?
Is that its name? I was like,
yeah.
He had 4. I mean, his deck was just like a bunch of 1-drops, 20 lands, and 4 Maniacal Rage. By the way, Maniacal Rage is back, right?
Yes. Although I don't know how much we're going to be seeing Maniacal Rage in actual goblin decks. Maybe. Maniacal Rage does have some sweet implications with Mentor, though, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Maniacal Rage is it's just like the toolbox for the not very bright, just like.
Well, I don't know about all that, because you got to be pretty bright sometimes to decide who gets angry. Like when you make somebody else's creature, when you make your opponent's creature bigger, and you're just like, yeah, I just don't want you to block. Yeah. That's pretty dope. I
mean, if you slap that onto some sort of an awesome defender creature, like a wall of whatever, that's...
Well, sure, that part's easy. I'm saying, you got to just have the gumption sometimes where you're like, oh, you just have a 5/5? Well, now you have a 7/7, but it can't block.
Does it have lifelink? Well, you won't be gaining life during this attack, buddy.
The two goblins... It seemed like goblins before, it was really the one spot that was in most need of help, and the two options are the Goblin Banneret and the Torch Courier. And I guess, I don't know, Torch Courier at least is kind of sweet with Mentor, right?
I mean, Banneret is the one that's got Mentor, though.
True, but who's got mana to pay that?
Yeah, Banneret seems really cumbersome to me. You got to work.
Yep.
I mean, its payoff is great, though, right? 2 mana for 2 damage, right? That's a semi-efficient fire breather.
Yeah. Its rate seems pretty good, actually. It's just I'm not sure if it lines up right with what with what it's looking like the format's about. What about Goblin Crater Maker as one of the 2-drops, man? And I know you were gushing about this card before, but now that we got the full context, are people going to play enough artifacts?
Well, it's not just artifacts, right? It's a target colorless non-land permanent. So there are some implications outside of Standard, right? It can kill.
Well, and Karn.
Yeah, Karn,
Scion of Urza.
I think maybe just because it can kill Karn, it might be good enough. That's actually that's pretty good.
It's not like dealing 2 to a creature is something to snub your nose at, or bite your thumb at.
This is solid. It's low version is a 3 casting cost shock, right? Which is on a creature.
Well, not to the face.
No, it's not good. So don't get me wrong, but it's just sometimes you need to do that. So and it also, in recent weeks and months, Karn has kind of made a comeback in Standard. So probably with such a wholesale removal of powerful permanents like Chandra, etc., Glorybringer, leaving Standard, maybe Karn will be even more popular than it was, and Goblin Crater Maker is going to have a job to do.
Yeah, I like the Crater Maker. I think it gets there. I don't love it, but I like it enough. I think Goblin Locksmith and Ornery Goblin are below the bar for me, though.
Goblin Locksmith is a flavor win, though.
Oh, for sure.
That guy's he's A+ for flavor.
And I still like Legion War Boss, you know. But from the looks of it, there's even more reason not to be playing, who needs to reduce the cost of your goblins when they all cost so little?
I'm actually more excited about a lot of the non-goblin red cards, actually.
More the spells like Lava Coil, or more the creatures like Runaway Steamkin?
I was actually thinking Risk Factor.
Oh, nice. Yes. 2 in a red instant. Target opponent may have Risk Factor. Yeah, we talked about this briefly last week. With the full context, are you just liking it from a red deck win sort of perspective?
Well, so Browbeat was like the predecessor to Risk Factor, right? And I think people just always like, oh, Browbeat's not good. Browbeat's not good. You know, Adrian Sullivan played Browbeat in a Standard Pro Tour, and he did okay. But people forget Raphael Levy had 4 Browbeats in his Blood Knight beatdown deck in Yokohama, I think back in 2007. Risk Factor does 1 point fewer than Browbeat. So Browbeat would do 5, right? Risk Factor could do 4. But this is an instant, right? So you can start crowding people at the end of their turn. It's very Char-like, very Flames of the Bloodhand-like. Or you can draw 3 cards, which is... That's not good, right? And then just untap and immediately get the jump start. Or you could, I don't know, if you have 6 mana, you could just get the jump start then and there.
The card that it a little bit reminds me of is this, it's like almost like a weird blending of Spark Elemental and Keldon Marauder of sorts. It's almost like, but with a little bit of Flames of the Bloodhand thrown in for good measure.
I mean, when you're talking about Spark Elemental and Keldon...
Yeah, it's basically Spark Elemental and Flames of the Bloodhand merged. You know? That's your type of jam?
I don't think I've ever cast a Spark Elemental in a tournament, actually. So to me, a Spark Elemental is like a bad Lava Spike. Yeah,
and this costs 6 times as much as Lava Spike, but you get to do 2.5 times as much damage. Or 2 2/3.
The fact that you could draw a bunch of cards is, I think that people have...
That's a drawback. That's totally a drawback, though. We can't, man. We can't. We got to start with step 1. This is deal 4 damage.
This is a char.
Not even char. It doesn't even hit. It doesn't even hit a creature. It's just like Flames of the Bloodhand, but instead of having the anti-life gain clause, it has a drawback that instead the opponent can buy out and let you draw 3 instead of, which is usually going to be worse, right? But particularly when you can just jumpstart it again next turn.
Yeah, it depends on how many lands you have in play, because if they just let you draw 3, the damage expectation of the 3 cards you draw is going to be pretty similar to Risk Factor. The problem is whether or not you can cast them, right? So if you've got 6 lands and then they just all right, draw 3, that's a problem because you've got a Risk Factor in the graveyard. You can just discard one of the cards that you just drew to cast Risk Factor again, right then and there at the end of their turn if you've got 6. So I think that this is it's a pretty nuanced card for a card that is pretty blunt.
Yeah, I think this one's actually going to be good enough.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's exciting.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be underestimated at first because of how cool it is to not like Punisher cards.
One of the things I liked about it is I think that you just get in these jammed up situations if you're playing with what's the new Outpost Siege called? Experimental Frenzy.
Yeah, the future site.
Yeah, so the thing about Experimental Frenzy is it's got a terrible clause because you can't play cards from your hand. So if you have a bunch of, sometimes you're going to get a situation where you have like 2 or 3 lands on top of your deck all at once, and you're just stuck. Like, you know how bad it feels to just top deck 2 or 3 lands? At least if you had cards in hand, you might be able to do something with lands you're drawing. But if you got Experimental Frenzy in play, you're just stuck now. I think that because of the Jumpstart interaction, there is some interplay between Risk Factor and Experimental Frenzy. Like,
definitely,
if you got Risk Factor in your graveyard, you can just discard one of the cards you couldn't cast, right? And then just get cast the land on top.
Particularly, you can also you can discard one of the cards you can't cast that has Jumpstart, so that when it's actually in your graveyard, you can cast it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Absolutely.
So are the red cards the ones you're most excited about? Because the black and green cards keep calling to me.
All right, so there's a card that I love in this set, and I think it's very surgical. Like, I looked at it initially, and I'm like, this card is awesome. Then I thought about it for a second, I'm like, this card is not good enough to play. Then I was just like, actually, the rate on this card's pretty good, but it just has to be played in a certain context. And that's where I landed on it now. And it's one of the...
And what card is that?
Vicious Rumors. Vicious Rumors has the text, it's a sorcery for B, deals 1 damage to each opponent. Each opponent discards a card, then puts the top card of their library into their graveyard, and you gain 1 life. If you're playing against, obviously in a group game, Vicious Rumors might be a crazy person to play, but it's like a pretty bad duress just in the abstract for B, because you don't get to aim. But I think that it actually has a place, and where its place is like backbreaking.
Where is its place?
I think like if you're playing one of these decks in Modern, maybe, like there's those decks that like they play a decent amount of lands. They play like 18, 20 lands, something around that, but they're like almost all ones. And like they're playing like a ton of ones. They're playing like...
You're not talking like smallpox decks, right?
No, I mean, like, just decks that have, like, if you just look at their profile, they have, like, a lot of cards like Dismember, and sometimes they have... Death Shadow and Dismember come together, like, a lot, right? But they're just, like, really super cheap. Like, they don't... Like, cheaper than a red deck wins deck, right? Like, they don't even have, like, very many 2s. I think a deck like that... I mean, like, but their action might be Snapcaster Mage or something, but the rest of it's all 1s. So there's, like, some decks like that. And I think those decks would really like to sideboard this card against red deck, against the red deck in Modern.
You're saying this card would be backbreaking
against the red deck?
Backbreaking.
Mess you up. Yeah.
Backbreaking.
Yeah. I don't want to play against this. The red deck doesn't draw extra cards. So, like, just make you discard any, even a land hurts. And then just, you get 1 life back. It sucks. I don't like it at all. No,
maybe.
I'm crazy. Vicious Rumors is terrible.
I don't know, man. I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but I think that Vicious Rumors looks like the type of card that was probably birthed in a very attractive person's brain. I think that it's fun, flavorful. I think the artwork is disturbing. I think that the card is potentially fringe playable. I don't think that I would expect to see too much of it in Modern. If we did, I bet it's just Reed Duke playing Smallpox.
Reed Duke dialing it back a few generations of Reed Duke. So there's like this version of Reed Duke likes Treetop Village. We're gonna spin it back a little bit.
I don't know. I think he's always gonna have a soft spot for Smallpox. I don't know. Maybe. I mean, there is a little bit of a weird cumulative thing too, right? Like, the more of this direct damage you play, like at a certain point, it becomes a plan, right? Like if you have a lot of card velocity, if you're just digging through your deck and you have enough of these drain for 3s, the second Vicious Rumor takes a turn off the clock. But I think you got to be pretty I struggle to see it, but I I wouldn't be surprised if you got to be caring a fair bit about your opponent having just surveilled or scryed or something so that they controlled the top of the deck, so that you're resetting that in order to get a little bit more than the sum of the parts.
I am going to make Vicious Rumors. I'm going to make Vicious Rumors happen in 2019.
I could believe it.
I'll
be mildly surprised, but I could see it.
It's just like, obviously this is not like an overwhelmingly powerful card.
Oh, like a backbreaking card?
But it costs 1. It's backbreaking. I changed my mind again. Snap that back.
You know what card is backbreaking for 1? Sometimes? Deadweight. Deadweight has been a modern and legacy rule times. Black -2/-2. This is yet another printing of this classic, but it's actually just like a very efficient way to buy yourself time. Particularly out of the sideboard of like say a blue-black control deck or some such. But having such a good additional answer in this new post-Fatal Push world, that's something to keep in mind. Like that's a very real thing.
Do you think Deadweight is apt to see much play in big formats like Modern or Legacy today? Like, because it's not a
once in a while.
Like, I think that this card was...
Yeah, it's definitely... You're right. Fatal Push has taken a lot of Deadweight's lunch. But also, it's going to come up... Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes you don't want to pay the life.
So I like this Deadweight...
Yeah, you are right, Fatal. Go ahead.
I like Deadweight a lot in Standard, like when it was around, I think, the first time. Because, like, Deadweight Sun Titan in Solar Flare decks was, like, surprisingly good. So the Sun Titan would just attack, get the because it's a permanent. So you get back and you just like basically have like Sun Titan machine gun. You couldn't get chump blocked by elves or tokens or whatever. And it's obviously good early game also, right? So you just play it on turn 1, kill their accelerator, etc. And like that was like a very, very cogent 2-card combination. But like I think that unless you have something like that going on, it's less exciting in formats that would allow a card like either Fatal Push or like specialist cards, right? Like sometimes you want your 1 casting cost removal spell to be able to hit a Black Planeswalker and nuke him if it's Liliana. Sometimes you want to gain life and remove a colorless creature from the game. So unless you're talking or some sort of specialist, I think that the default has to go to Fatal Push unless there's a specific synergy.
Yeah, I just mean that Deadweight has shown up at times. This new Standard format doesn't even have Fatal Push. And that's part of the reason why I think the new Deadweight is going to have purpose in this Standard format.
Oh, I think it could definitely see play in Standard. I mean, the casting cost is outstanding relative to what it can take out, right? Like there's 3/2 creatures for 3, for example. And yeah, there's
also some really big games that you want to deal with. Like if your opponent drops, like some of these mentor creatures, being able to kill that for 1 mana is such a tempo positive little maneuver. And not every deck is going to have enough creatures in its graveyard to be able to use Necrotic Wound.
Yeah, I agree. Like maybe Deadweight is more in a mid-range or control deck, and Necrotic.
Yeah, like black control.
Dedicated deck.
If you like the rumors, man, you've got to be like interested in Burglar Rat, right?
Burglar Rat. Oh man, in Nationals 1999, I moved my Duresses to the sideboard to play 4 copies of Burglar Rat 1999 in my
Ravenous Strats.
I did, and the ones that I owned had the words "die."
They're different,
Are they?
There is a key difference. Yeah.
Oh, each opponent. Each opponent.
Exactly, which is 2 parts. One, in multiplayer, the Burglar Rat gets its lunch, but second of all, it beats hexproof. If your opponent, let's say you're playing Modern, and your opponent has like a Leyline of Sanctity, Burglar Rat can still get a card.
I see that.
Which is something, it's not much, but it's something. But like in Standard, there's going to be times where your opponent has an Angel, and you're still going to want to burglar them, even if they have hexproof.
I hear you.
this burglar rat just seems like it could be so, like, against some of these goblins, what more in this world do you want than a 2-for-1?
I mean, it was true the first time somebody said that, and it's still true today. Like, I think that there's probably going to be decks, like probably green-black based decks that are just like 22 for ones, right? And then just like some haymaker at the top, and it's going to be hard to beat them with non-dedicated control fair decks. Like, basically decks that don't have Teferi will be like way behind against those decks. Or maybe Chain Whirler, because most of the 2-for-1s get destroyed by Chain Whirler. But I'm now creating a schema where I lose to Chain Whirler and Teferi. Wow, that idea did not last long in my head.
Well, on the note of losing to Chain Whirler, it has an obvious glaring weakness there. But do you think Pilfering Imp might have what it takes? This is that black 1/1 flyer that has 1 and a black and tap it and sacrifice Pilfering Imp. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a non-land card from it. That player discards that card, and you can only play this when you can play a sorcery.
I like this card. I actually like it in big formats more than I like it in standard, in part because of the prevalence of Chain Whirler. But this card just feels very Kite Sail Freebooter to me. It's got the flying, just being able to be played on turn 1 and just get in there. And then just, all right, the board's kind of settling down. Maybe on turn 4 or so, I'll use the Pilfering Imp. At which point, it can't be countered easily, right? Like, this isn't it's not a spell at this point, right? So interaction things change. I think this is a very solid card, actually. I like it.
I do, too. I think that a 1/1 flying creature for 1 isn't necessarily off by a mile. And this is a very useful tactical ability. You might drop this guy, get a few points in, and then the turn before your opponent plays, like let's say you're at a spot where they hold up Settle the Wreckage mana. Perfect time to pilfer.
Oh, wow. That's a murdering.
Now, the other thing I like about it is that it's a creature. And I think that having creatures that have spell-like utility but stock your graveyard for Undergrowth could actually be an important part of deck building. Like Pilfering Imp has a natural way to go to the graveyard to help increase your Undergrowth count. But it also, even when you're just milling yourself, you want to have a critical mass of cards that are going to power up your Undergrowth. And the body, the 1/1 flyer, is actually well used in a Undergrowth strategy because of cards like Moonmark Painter. 2 black. This is the one we talked about a couple weeks ago, that when it enters the battlefield, gives one of your creatures +X/+0. And Menace. Well, Menace is already a little bit of evasion, but sometimes your opponent just has 2 creatures. How often are they going to have 2 flying blockers? And so, like, if you can, once in a while get a little extra mileage out of the Pilfering Imp as a thing worth buffing, that's kind of interesting too.
Yeah, I just point out 2 things. One of them, remember the year that you came in, one of the many years that you came in seconds at the World Championships in New York with the Dragonstorm deck? Zvi Moshowitz and company played a 1/1 flyer that couldn't block. That was a card in their deck. So instead of having just the ability to block like Pilfering Imp has, and this other cool ability, they played a much deprecated version of that just for the 1/1 flying body they could play on turn 1. So there is precedent already. Separately, isn't this kind of card like exactly what you want in a Gruesome Menagerie deck? Right? Like it's right there. It's one of the things you're going to get back.
We are eye to eye. That was exactly where I wanted to go with this. I think you are 100% right. Being able to, so this is the 3 black. Choose a creature with converted mana cost 1, and another one for 2, and another one for 3, and you put them all onto the battlefield. The whole thing with the Gruesome Menagerie is it's a lot. It's a very, very, like, its high end is like way better than Cloud Goat Ranger, but you got to actually do a lot of setup. You have to get all those different types, and they all have to be in the graveyard. And each time you miss one, it doesn't take much before you're behind. But yeah, I'm on the exact same page. I think Gruesome Menagerie's got the ceiling that's like well north of Cloud Goat Ranger. When everything's coming together, wow, do you have a huge impact on the board? But it takes a lot, because if you miss even a single cost out of the 1, 2, and 3, you're very frequently, you start getting into being very, very mediocre instead of just so dominating. It can be okay still, but you really want to make sure if you're going to play Gruesome Menagerie that you've got like a real good spread of good ones, good twos, and good threes. And this is the type of one that's actually higher impact on turn 5 than most. A lot of one drops, if you bring them back, how much are they even doing?
Oh, yeah, but versus this one, you're tapping out for the Menagerie, and then the next turn you're perfectly poised for that Settle the Wreckage play that you were talking about. What do you think about Night Veil Sprite there? Right, so you can start off on the Imp, follow up with Night Veil Sprite on turn 2. This is really a good way, I think, if you're in the market for a 1/2 flyer for 2, to stock your graveyard.
Yeah, so one of the nice things about the Night Veil Sprite is the not increased exposure to Goblin Chain Whirler. Like, if you're going to be committing more, it's funny to value a 1/2 instead of a 2/1, But I think that you got to be realistic if you're going to be trying to build in this Goblin Chain Whirler world. But I still just don't think this card has enough of an impact. Like, I think that you'd have to really be getting some kind of synergy out of it being a fairy or whatever. I think the fact that, you'd have to really value the Surveil in the short run, because obviously we don't have the fairy enablers yet. But the amount that you're just paying in order to surveil one compared to the impact that lots of other 2-drops have, I think we're going to find that there's just too stiff of competition. But I don't know.
I was thinking about it like in two different senses. One is just like if I were playing a Cloud Djinn deck, right? Like mono blue deck, evasion, fast clock, and then just kind of protect the queen sort of strategy. I think Night Veil Sprite could be helpful both in that it gets going on the offense, a turn 2 earlier than kind of the main event, the Djinn itself. But that once you're like in a situation where like, all right, I'm kind of winning, it can help keep you going because it can just help you just draw counterspells. And then the second thing I was thinking about this card in particular is just like in relation to Looter Ilkor. Like, isn't this like a little bit better of a card than Looter Ilkor?
No, I don't think so.
Like Looter,
a card for, like the being able to draw a card and then discard a card.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah, compared to just surveilling, looting is way better than surveilling.
I think that the cards are pretty comparable. Like, I agree that fixing your hand is actually better than surveilling, but Night Veil Sprite does it on attack trigger instead of actually having to hit somebody. Where Looter Ilkor, I guess you can't really block Looter Ilkor.
When you have Shadow,
yeah, all right, yeah, because I was just thinking like it's similar to Looter Ilkor anyway, and Looter Ilkor was played in like green decks played Looter Ilkor because it was so good. So
yeah, but they also had Madness to synergize. Like, when you have combos, this card, we'd have to see what kind of combos it actually has.
Like, you had Moldervine Cloak and Call of the Herd and all kinds of stuff back then.
Yeah. So I guess I'm cool on this one, but I suppose it's possible. It's not necessarily that far off, Like, at least you're not getting Chain Warlord any harder. Go ahead.
Everybody's getting Chain. Even the Teferi deck gets Chain Whirlered, right? Like, take a loyalty counter down.
The existence of the Chain Whirler also kind of tempers my enthusiasm for Murmuring Mystic, the 3 and a blue 1/5. That I know you like this card, but like I worry that whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue bird with flying. The Chain Whirler equity, I think, is like a real thing. And it's not like there's just so many incredible cantrips, right?
Yeah, I think that this is the kind of card that if your opponent just lets you do what you're going to do, you can take over the game with it very easily, and that there are probably quite a few commonly played things that are going to give the Murmuring Mystic problems. Like, not the least of which is just like, say you're playing against a control deck, this is a forecasting cost creature that doesn't have a huge amount of offensive power until it kind of gets engine going. Like they just counterspell it or something, or lock it down with one of their infinite ways to deal with a faster creature than this. So, but I do think like if you just have it in a situation where your opponent wasn't prepared to interact with a 1/5 creature, once you untap with it in play, it's hard to imagine it not taking over. Right? This is like a much worse situation for your opponent than just having like a Whirler Virtuoso. And
yeah, I mean, this is a very durable young Pyromancer. And 1/1 flyers are quite a bit different than just 1/1 on the ground.
Yeah, I think it's very like again, you have to be in a spot where all right, now we're going, right? But like once you're going, I think it's going to be hard to lose control of the battlefield. So your opponent's going to either destroy it before that happens or go over the top because you're just going to clutter the board and they're not going to be able to block and you're going to be able to block infinitely.
How much do you think Drowned Secrets is going to target your opponent and how much is it going to target yourself? This is the 1 and a blue enchantment. Whenever you cast a blue spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard.
I think it's going to target the opponent more. I think this card might be what the modern Millstone deck was looking for. You know that deck that's just like
yep.
You play. I mean, I played against it relatively.
Like you're trying to 13 them a bunch.
I mean, it reliably gets you with a 13. If they draw 2 of those, it's often very difficult to get anything because like you don't have mana producing lands in your deck at some point. But they've got like all kinds of different, black and blue, black, blue, and 1 things that are taking 10 plus cards out at a time. I think this might be the card that puts it over the top, right? Because that deck is surprisingly disruptive and surprisingly fast. It's just a little bit not fast enough. So like maybe if they get a really meaningful 2 like this, because like they're unless they cast like Glimpse on turn 2, most of their stuff doesn't start get going until like turn 3.
Well, on turn 2, this is actually quite a bit better than Glimpse if you're going to play it on turn 2, that's saying a lot. Because like in particular, if you get to start doubling up on this, because like you can just play this on 2, and then on turn 3 your other enchantment, and then you mill them for 4, and you're just off to the races.
Yeah, or like
because like next turn you're going to just explode.
Like I can even think of like situations where like turn 2 Drowned Secrets, play a land, turn 3 Drowned Secrets, get them for 2, and then like Thought Scour or something, which is like not that exciting. Like now that's like 2 triggers and the Thought Scour. That's pretty good. But plus you're drawing into another thing. Like the next turn you might take like some ridiculous amount of milling, and that's without hitting them with a trap.
And I can't help but wonder about self-mill, about the ability to use this in yourself to find a whole bunch of jumpstart cards or to make your Undergrowth just that much stronger.
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about this set in general, and I didn't think about Drowned Secrets this way, but I did think about Wand of Vertebrae this way. It's just like, to what degree is there an incentive to just like, if I get an effect cheaply enough, right? And I think a one-time 2-mana investment in Drowned Secrets actually qualifies this way, but I think maybe like a one-time 1-mana investment in Wand of Vertebrae on turn 1 might also qualify. I'm just like randomly milling myself for 1 or 2 a turn. How much better is my deck if I'm doing this? Like, because like if I'm playing with cards like, I'm just going to say cards because they're the ones that have the most obvious triggers, whether or not that's the best way to build it. Like I've got Crippling Chills or I've got Narcomoebas, right? Like just every turn I'm just getting myself a little bit. How many times do you actually have to trigger a chill or a Narcomoeba before you've gotten paid back? I think 2, you're already way ahead, right?
It's an interesting question. There's also the question of how many extra creatures into your graveyard before you've gotten enough mileage out of your Undergrowth cards. Like before your Golgari Raiders being a 9/9 instead of a 6/6 is like a meaningful change. And speaking of which, I actually think Golgari Raiders is like very much a card that we should be taking it on. Doesn't this card just slam so hard for a green creature with haste?
Oh yeah, I'm actually the thing I'm torn about with Golgari Raiders is this a fair card or an unfair card?
This is a way for like decks that at times look kind of fair. This is a little bit where they reveal their true selves.
Yeah.
This card reveals a little bit of just how this is a little bit how the Golgari get made, if you catch my drift. Like this card I think is going to make some decks. It's going to push them over the line where them doing some synergy type stuff could be at risk of getting kind of degenerate.
That sounds unfair.
Yeah, but I think they're going to have to earn it. Like they're going to be playing a bunch of cards where it looks like they're playing fair for a while, but then they just relatively quickly have these 10/10 haste creatures. Yeah. And it's an elf. Remember, it's an elf, which is not nothing.
Yeah, I like it a lot. I mean, a lot of the things that I've been thinking about is, just to summon the spirit of Nate Heiss. What if we just started with like a Milliken on turn 2, right? Like, how different would our world be?
Yeah, but there's not really a Milliken though.
Oh no, that's.
Are you going back to your sprite?
Well, yeah, I'm just trying to. Well, I mean, the sprite is no Milliken, right? The Milliken is the sprite and taps for mana. But yeah, that guy would never live today. Like, you imagine somebody casts a Milliken, you would kill that so quickly.
Definitely. Dead weight that. So, dude, what do you think about Hatchery Spider as the tippity top?
We are so on the same page on this. I was thinking the same thing. So Hatchery Spider is 5GG for a 5/7 spider with reach, but it's got a heck of an undergrowth ability, right? So its undergrowth abilities, when you cast this spell, so it's a cast trigger, reveal the top X cards of your library, where X is the number of creature cards in your graveyard. You may put a green permanent card with converted mana cost X or less from among them onto the battlefield. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Like, this card it's so powerful because it's a cast trigger, so it doesn't even have to resolve. And I mean, depending on how many creatures you've got in your graveyard, like, you can really get paid back. Like, you can get like a 10/10 creature or some other kind of giant dinosaur, or maybe like a planeswalker. I don't know, something cool. Maybe a Golgari Raiders for 10.
And the ability to scale it up, it makes it so it's pretty easy to control, right? Like, where you're like, I need it to consistently be for at least 6, for instance, because that's how much my dragon is, and then I can hit anything. And it just being spread out in being 2 different threats.
Yeah. I think that making it a cast trigger was like pretty elegant from a design or development standpoint. Can you imagine if it was like a come to play ability, like enters the battlefield? Like, you could, I'm sure you could.
Machinable.
Yeah, you just have 4 Hatchery Spiders, and then the next thing every time. It's like, you have like, all right, I have 15 creatures in my grid. Hatchery Spider, Hatchery Spider, Hatchery Spider, Golgari Raiders get you for 15, and I've got like 20 power back. I think that would be a problem. Or like the last one gets like a Fires of Yavimaya equivalent. Here comes 20.
All right, now that we've discussed all these not just green-white aggro cards, what about the green-white aggro cards, man? Doesn't green-white seem just filthy? Oh, you're not a buyer, huh?
No, I mean, it has some good cards. I mean, I don't know if we even talked about the 2-drop that makes the 1/1s. What's the name of the Selesnya Lord?
Yeah, Amara, Soul of the Accord. Yeah, we talked about this a little bit, but it's an elf, which is relevant, obviously. But green-white, 2/2, whenever it becomes tapped, you get a 1/1 soldier with lifelink. So being able to get 1/1 lifelink soldiers each time you convoke, let alone just when you attack.
Yep.
That's not. Plus, it's a legend, and I think that having a critical mass of legends could actually be could actually be a real part of the green-white, like the green-white deck's plan. Just basically historic triggers, really.
Yeah, so this card it's undercosted, I think, like relative to, what's the legendary vampire, Mavern Fen? Is that the name of it?
Yeah, Mavern Fen, yep.
Like, isn't this like a very similar card to that, but just 1 mana cheaper?
It's, I think, well better than Mavern Fen.
And that was like one of the main payoffs to playing vampires, I think.
Yep.
So this is, I think, like, as like kind of the underlying bones of your green white deck, like this is a pretty solid place to start.
Yeah, I think this card's just it ties the whole room together. There's so much to like with what it does. With Convoke, enabling Convoke further, it really pushes you towards more Convoke. But I mean, like being able to use things like Conclave, Tribunal, just that much more effectively. And then all these extra tokens, I think, are going to be just so juicy in green-white because of just how unreal Flower Flourish is.
If we're going to go tokens, Amara Soul of the Accord, kind of go wide, but with access to also, a pretty established amount of mana, do you think Camaraderie is the top end of the curve, or do you think something else? Or would you rather just like give, for this amount of mana, would you rather kind of go like target creature gains +3/+3, target creature gains +3/+3, target creature gains +3/+3, or something else?
I guess something else. Because here's the thing. I like some of those cards, but at the end of the day, I like Chalet, and I love Flower Flourish. And so I think that Flower Flourish costing 6 and Chalet Voice of Plenty's activation costing 6 is going to really eat up much appetite for any cards that actually cost 6.
Yeah, I can buy that. I mean, I guess that 6 mana activation is such a good catch-all because you don't actually have to do it, right? You're at 4 and you've got things going on. It just so happens that if you are a little flooded, you have a thing to do.
Yeah.
Versus sticking a card in your deck that you need to actually get to 6.
Exactly. Because I think that, Camaraderie is going to have a bigger impact in those spots. I think the flexibility, the fact that Flower Flourish cycles so easily for forest or plains, whatever you need, that's just so incredible. And obviously Chalet coming down just has a meaningful impact on the game in the mid-turns, on turn 4.
Do you think?
I also think Chalet is good when you're just hanging out. Like if you're going to be, like I think that if you play a Convoke strategy, sometimes you're sacrificing some of your early aggression in order to build a bigger board presence. And it kind of naturally plays into the kind of game that Chalet wants to, where Chalet wants you to stall the game out and then your board position just become overwhelming.
Yeah, you're just king sit there. Do you think Camaraderie might have a place in sideboards?
It could. I still just, I don't know. I don't know how much you're going to want cards that cost exactly 6. Like, why Camaraderie instead of anything else?
I feel like if you're playing a kind of a mirror-ish match, you want something that goes like well over the top. Like if your opponent has like similar tools to you, like Chalet, and you're just like, you've got your legendary angels staring against each other across the red zone and nobody's attacking and somebody's afraid of a giant growth and so nothing happens. Like you need a card that actually is just like, all right, I am now officially a mile ahead of you. Right? Not like kind of grind it out and hope the other guy isn't doing the same thing. Like that.
Maybe, but like, couldn't you just potentially just be like March of the Multitudes, untap, overrun? Like, do you need to go a mile over the top?
Only. I mean, I guess I'm just thinking like Camaraderie after that march is like extraordinarily going big. Like, I'm just thinking about how big you can go and how unlikely it would be for a green-white deck to be able to resist that size of bigness.
See, I think if you're going to go that route, I think that you want to like lean into the elves a bit more because like I like I kind of like green white with like a little bit more of the token centric aspect. But if you're going to do the camaraderie, then I think you want to have more accelerators, more extra green creatures that are contributing to getting you mana and a board presence faster.
Oh, sure. I mean, just like playing elves into like a relatively accelerated camaraderie that's actually great for all involved, right? You have creatures that are contributing to your mana acceleration, and getting to that 6 or whatever is what lets you cast camaraderie, which counts the mana accelerators in play.
Well, and it's not even clear that the first chance you get to play camaraderie that you're going to, but if you are playing tons of accelerators, if you play an accelerator on turn 1, an accelerator on turn 2, and an accelerator on turn 3, and whatever else, the ability to actually camaraderie and have a big chunk of your hand already on the table, it's just a lot more realistic.
Sure. Now you've got a whole new hand.
But you see what I mean with camaraderie kind of going the opposite way, as like if you're just trying to play like good creatures, like if you're playing Amara, Soul of the Accord, and Chalet, and I mean it's okay, I guess. It's just
I think one of the things I don't like about it, just listening to you talk about early games and Amara, is just like the presence of this card creates volatility at least some of the time in spots that you don't want it, right? Like if you're like leaning into the elves, you're like, all right, I got a lot of accelerators. You want your draws to look consistently a certain way so that you can do the things that those draws build on in a consistent basis. And that like, you're like, all right, elf, stuck on, quote unquote, stuck on 5 mana based on how many lands I've drawn. Camaraderie, this doesn't really fit.
Yeah. I'd also just want to really prioritize flexibility, because I think there are so many flexibility and inherent card power. Because I think there are so many options for how to go over the top and go wide and make tokens and get card advantage and yada, 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 that when I see a card like Flower Flourish that has this incredible flexibility of being able to fix your mana, or a card like Amara that costs relatively little that can have such an impact early or late that just fits so naturally into so many of the strategies, so many of the different aspects of the strategy, I should say, or a card like Conclave Tribunal that's like an established winner that just synergistically is like even better here than it normally would be. Whereas I think that camaraderie's kind of I mean, maybe out of the sideboard is the way to do it, but it does seem to me kind of a lot less flexible for only a little bit more power. Dude, how good is this set for History of Benalia in general, though?
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought about that. Super best friends, huh?
Yeah, the ability to get the tokens, but also once the tokens are in play, they can attack, get the full value of, the full value of that Chapter 3 of History of Benalia, and then post-combat be used to convoke something.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, like, you just play like a critical mass of 2-for-1 token producers then.
Well, you can, but even there, the question comes back to how much do you want to play just cards for a particular synergy versus really powerful cards that kind of synergize with a lot of things?
I think that if I were building a green-white, call it aggro-ish deck, tokens or something else, I think I would probably start by selecting cards like History of Benalia that were just very good, or Amara's just very good to start, and then figure out, what the right curve and the right mana base would be but also build into my deck a way that I could kind of get paid back for all the investments that I'm making, right? So whether that's convoking or whether that's some sort of overrun, I think I would want to have something like that, because even if you had, obviously History of Benalia is an outstanding card, you can get brickwalled by somebody with a 3/3.
Yeah. Yeah, at least in the short run. That's why I think you want to play. That's not why, but that's part of the benefit of playing so many anthems. Like, I think there are a number of ways to buff your creatures that are going to be really important, because I think a lot of people are going to have random donks that could just brickwall you. And it's not like even if they don't have a 3/3 shutting you down, if they just have enough 2/2s that drew them a card, you don't want to just be running into that.
Yeah.
But the other interesting part to me of History of Benalia isn't even just the synergy with Convoke. It's knights you control get +2/+1. And the nice thing about that is that it's not just the knight tokens from History of Benalia. There's a couple new knights in this set that are well worth a look. Like Knight of Autumn, 1 green white, 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, choose to either give it 2+1/+1 counters, or destroy target artifact or enchantment, or you gain 4 life. This card is excellent, and it's a knight. You're just free rolling at a knight.
Standing, right? So
Absolutely.
This card is
absolutely.
It just starts off better than, is it Reclamation Sage? Is that the name of it?
This card starts off better than lots of things. This card is just outstanding. This is the kind of flexibility on a really good card I was talking about.
Yeah, it's just spectacular. I mean, like, one of the abilities is put 2+1/+1 counters on it. Like, it's like fail state is 4/3 for 3, right?
Right.
I mean,
yeah, but you can also buy a Reclamation Sage whenever and you can buy most of a Kitchen Finks when you want. This card is just absolutely fantastic.
Oh, but this card is like, it gains as much life as a Loxodon Hierarch.
Yeah.
This is a very, very good card.
Definitely.
No doubt.
And it's a knight, which helps buff the History of Benalia. And here's another one, Conclave Cavalier. Green, white for a 4/4 vigilance that when it dies, you get 2/2 green and white elf knights with vigilance. Elf knight with vigilance is an interesting creature type, but whatever. It's like a 4/4 vigilance knight. So you're getting the bonus from History of Benalia, and you're getting all the little, the same Convoke combos, and you're giving yourself some insurance against sweepers, and just being, more staying power for just powering through removal.
Did we just mention that it's a 4/4 for 4, which is like a pretty good spot to be? Not the best spot, but just very good.
Like, if we could play a 3-mana 4/4 vigilance, we would snap it up. And so, like, the fact that this is a 4/4 vigilance for 4, I mean, you're only paying 1 more mana to get this ability to die into 2/2s with vigilance and on creature types. So this card, I think, is it's solid. It's hard to want to play too many expensive cards, but I think that it's interesting to note the quantity of knights for a green-white deck. There's also that Ledev champion guy, but he doesn't do it for me. That's the 1 green-white for a 2/2 that when it attacks, you can tap any number of untapped creatures to give this guy +1/+1 until end of turn for each creature tapped this way, and then you can pay 5 to get a 1/1 lifelink soldier. I think this guy's, it's a fine draft card, but I don't think it's going to do enough for constructed. I think there's just too much competition. Too much competition for ways to tap your creatures for benefit, and too much competition for ways to spend your mana for profit.
That's fair.
Actually back a little bit more in Guilds of Ravnica, now that we've seen the whole spoiler, is there enough surveil for disinformation campaign?
I want to say yes, but I don't know what the structure is, because a lot of the ideas that I think of are like, if I just had so many surveil cards, then I actually haven't taken the time yet to try to make a surveil linear, but I want to say I want to say yes.
I'm going to be trying. I don't have the highest hopes, just because, like, in a lot of ways, it seems like the payoff, is a lot like, like in Amonkhet, the enchantments bouncing back to your hand. It's like when you get it going, it's still a little bit clunky because you just have to spend so much mana on this thing. The thing I would call out, though, is to keep a very close eye if you have any card that reduces the cost of enchantments by 1. I think that the amount that this card scales when you have a card like that is actually could be really surprising. Saving a mana each time. Although on the topic of blue-black, we should note that Atrata, the Silencer, does shuffle back each hit that you would do. So thank God this card is not just a one-card lockout quite so easily.
Yeah, we got that one wrong, but it's still pretty good.
I don't think so.
No?
Nope. I'm off it.
It's a bad Vraska's Contempt now?
I'm off it. Yeah, it's a really bad Vraska's Contempt. Then again, if you care about it being a legend, and then you can just, like, abuse it that way, that might be sweet. I think you just really have to be in the market for a 3/5 unblockable, which you might be. That's fine. It's not like it's really bad.
You would be back in the market for it one turn later. You're like, I really need a 3/5 unblockable. Well, somewhere in my deck there's a 3/5 unblockable. That's what he does, right?
Yeah.
Runs away at the altar.
Yep. So back to the Night Veil Predator. Although, actually, dude, if we're going to be talking some of these evasion guys, what about Thief of Sanity, man? We touched on this earlier, but I the more that I look at it, the more I kind of feel like this guy might actually be the real deal.
So Thief of Sanity,
it's going to depend on what kind of red removal people play, but
yeah, it's a 1 black-blue for a 2/2 flying creature specter, right? So it's echoing something, and so it has the additional text. Whenever Thief of Sanity deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 3 cards of that player's library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest into their graveyard for as long as that card remains exiled. You may look at it, you may cast it, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type to cast that spell. So this is like a kind of a weird card drawing spell that's also disrupting the opponent's library, right? And it feels like a Hypnotic Spectre, kind of.
I don't know, they're hearkening to that. But, I mean, it really is a lot more of like a Shadow Mage Infiltrator, right?
Because of its color combination or because of its...
No, just like... you're getting material. Your opponent's not losing it.
I see, yeah. I mean, they're getting milled, but I mean, that's not...
That's kind of giving them material. But being able to play the extra cards, I mean, I think that Shadow Mage Infiltrator and Hypnotic Spectre don't play the exact same,
No, I think they're cousins, like they're both, hey, I'm a 3-drop, I've got little evasion to me, I'm gonna get an advantage for our master. But yeah, they're kind of do so in opposite directions.
You kind of get some really nice selection with this thing, though, right?
Yeah, it's powerful, right? Like it's like sifting.
Like being able to get the best of your opponent's top 3, you're getting way better stuff than they get, and that's not even counting whatever you draw.
Certainly are.
We were talking about being able to mill ourselves earlier. What about going all the way to Wand of Vertebrae? The colorless artifact, tap,
yep.
Put the top card of your library into your graveyard, and you can pay 2, tap, and exile Wand of Vertebrae to shuffle up to 5 target cards from your graveyard into your library.
I like this card. Like I was saying earlier, if you just like do it to yourself randomly, if you have the right cards in your deck, you're going to get paid off. But the other place that I like this is if I'm playing Experimental Frenzy, for 2 reasons. One, it's just a cheap card. It costs 1. And if you've got it on top of your library when you have Frenzy in play, the cheaper the cards that you can cast that are not lands on top of your library, just the more cards you're going to get once Frenzy's in play.
Yep. Plus,
yeah, if you get consecutive lands, this will save you.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. This synergizes so well with any of those cards that let you play cards off the top.
Yeah, I think this card is very deceptively, because it looks like a card that doesn't do anything, right? But it actually it does quite a bit and doesn't ask for very much mana. And I think that the 2-tap exile Wand of Vertebrae, shuffle up to 5 target cards from your graveyard in your library, I don't think that's going to come up that often. Maybe sometimes.
Yeah, maybe it's like a fallback in case you just mill yourself too much and you just need to, not get decked.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's going to be the most common reason that this card is played. Although it's a defensive card, like somebody's trying to mill you.
What about Chamber Sentry, the new hangerback? I mean, I guess it's more the new Walking Ballista. So X for a 0/0, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it, and then you can tap it and pay X and remove X +1/+1 counters from it. It deals X damage to any target, and you can pay Wooburg to return it from your graveyard to your hand.
This card's pretty cool. It could be like a 5/5 for 5, right? Like that's one of its modes.
Mm-hmm. But it can be a 2/2 for 2.
Yeah.
Isn't a 2/2 for 2 that you can get back for Wooburg already? Like at least like you take the phone call?
I think this card's solid. Yeah. I mean, it has the other ability too.
Yeah, and I think the other ability is quite decent. I don't know. This card looks good to me.
Like, I think it's like a sit there, do nothing Teferi blue-white deck might be in trouble against this card.
Well, see, the thing is that being able to exile it and have your problem solved is a real weakness against those kind of decks. Like this guy can't just sack to dodge some kind of exile effect. And that tap and remove counters ability is summoning sick, so to speak.
Oh, but once it isn't summoning sick, it can do that ability, right?
Definitely. If you've got that kind of mana,
I mean, you're probably going to want to be clocking someone for 5, but
right. I think it's a lot about the flexibility of this card early on, combined with the Wooburg to get it back. But I don't think it's going to be like I mean it's not there's some aesthetic comparisons to Walking Ballista, but I don't think this card's in the zip code. But I think this card is it looks solid to me. It looks like it's going to have purpose, specifically when you want to have a cheap play, but also a little bit of long game plan in your deck that does a lot of surveilling. And it's a historic trigger. Like, for instance, you can play this card for 0.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's like a real thing.
It won't last very long if you do that, though.
Well, then you can rebuy it.
Oh, that's true. But I think one of the things that is important to note here is that you have to have a highly specialized strategy to be able to take advantage of Chamber Sentry at any level of card advantage, right?
Yeah. Or you could just have some special cards like Chromatic Lantern. It's a Chromatic Lantern, and then your blue-white splash red deck suddenly takes on a whole new meaning.
Yep.
So where do you think you want to start? What's the color combination that is most attractive to you?
Red blue.
Straight red blue.
Like red blue or Grixis, I think. I like.
Why don't you like Teferi?
I don't dislike Teferi. I just want to. I want to try to take advantage of some offense, but then have some staying power. That's kind of the model I have in my head.
Is there any one particular card, or like what is it about the offense with some staying power?
Like I'm just thinking like. We talked earlier about playing Risk Factor like as a burn spell, right? Like, do cards like Risk Factor or even Experimental Frenzy get better in blue decks?
I don't think so.
No, I do. They're both worse.
I think they're worse. Experimental Frenzy, worse in a blue deck. Risk Factor, worse in a blue deck, yep.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'm open-minded. I'm not optimistic, though. See, me, when I see this file, God, the two things to call out to me are either Doom Whisperer or Pelt Collector. I think you were right. Last week, you pegged Doom Whisperer. The more I think about it, the warmer I am on Doom Whisperer. And just doing it a lot more. Like, I want to see Doom Whisperer in a lot of just, like, mid-range board control decks.
Do you want to see Doom Whisperer, like, in black-blue or mono-black?
All of it. Yes. And black-white. And black-green. And Sultai. All that.
Okay. I'm
all
down.
All that.
I'm down.
All that. And then Pelt Collector. Dude, I think Pelt Collector is like a real deal 1-drop in a world of 2-drops and 4-drops and 5-drops. You know, like, this is Pelt Collector just seems like it could be part of so many sick openings.
Sure. It's got a lot of Champion of the Parish to it.
Yeah, but for anybody.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends on how much do you want to go wide versus how much do you want a bunch of guys that are, like, awesome. But I think that there's a lot to like about green and white, and I think there's a lot to like about any combination involving Doom Whisperer.
I really agree on the Doom Whisperer. I think that I'm going to try mono black to start. Probably will discard it quickly, but I think that the ability to showcase a card like that at the top of the curve while consistently hitting all your stuff and not having to worry about colors is probably pretty attractive.
Yeah, any chance you're going to use that land, being able to, and then just like a whole bunch of swamps and then crypts?
Which land? The one that taps for colorless and then... Yep.
Being able to just get for all your black.
Yeah, I was thinking about playing like as many as 4 of that.
Seems like a lot. It seems like you need to have a way to actually get paid off with some way to, some big way over the top. Or are you thinking like
maybe 2 is right?
Tutors, or
I haven't tried it yet. I was just
sure.
thinking like, where do I start, and kind of just mentally where I started, and probably play a few games. I'm like, all right, this was, impacting my ability to come out early. Move those numbers around a little bit.
All right, sweet. Well, lots of awesome stuff, and I look forward to seeing you break it in Modern with Vicious Rumors.
I heard a rumor was going to happen.
Dude, I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna love it. Me, I'm just gonna oscillate between Doom Whisperer decks and green white aggro.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge, so jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis. Also out of friends got left behind. Not to lose my mind. Trapped in a vault with nothing but time. Parents and my friends